It's important because it allows you to think about what's just been said. However, before his death, Roger's widow revealed an awful truth. And what she shared isn't unexpected. It's deeply personal. The truth might just change how you remember America's favorite neighbor forever. One of the most powerful children's shows in television history didn't rely on flashy graphics or loud characters, but on the strength of one man speaking directly to your soul. Let's walk through that neighborhood and explore the gentle revolution Fred started with a little show that made a massive difference. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the show that redefined childhood. Fred Rogers was never aiming to be a TV star. What he wanted, more than anything, was to meet children where they were, right in the middle of their big emotions, small questions, and growing hearts. And he did it with a calm voice, thoughtful eyes, and a neighborhood that changed lives. When Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood first aired on PBS in 1968, it didn't come with flashing lights, zany characters, or fast-paced stories. It was calm, almost disarmingly so. Fred Rogers would enter through the door, hang up his coat, slip into that iconic cardigan, swap his shoes for sneakers, and start singing, "Won't You Be My Neighbor?" It felt more like a visit with a trusted friend than a TV show. But that was the point. Fred built the show as a kind of emotional classroom. While other programs were teaching numbers and the alphabet, Fred was helping kids navigate feelings, fear, anger, sadness, joy, giving them the language to understand what was going on inside them. The show tackled topics like divorce, death, race, and disability, without ever talking down to its audience. It was slow television, yes, but deeply intentional. Episodes also dipped into the whimsical neighborhood of make-believe, where puppets like King Friday the 13th, Daniel Tiger, and Lady Elaine Fairchild played out mini-dramas that reflected real-life situations. Fred voiced several key puppets himself, each reflecting part of his personality. Over the course of 31 seasons, from 1968 to 2001, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood aired 895 episodes. That's not only impressive, it's unheard of for a show with such a niche mission. But its staying power wasn't about flash, it was about heart. Fred knew that kids didn't need more noise. They needed stillness, they needed honesty, and they needed someone who didn't treat their problems like they were just kid stuff. Each episode became a little time capsule of comfort. No laugh tracks, no loud sound effects, no commercial breaks. Just Fred speaking directly to the camera, like he was speaking directly to you. And for a lot of viewers, especially those growing up in chaotic homes or feeling out of place, the 30 minutes with Mr. Rogers felt like the safest part of the day. While the tone of the show was subtle, the guest list sometimes made a bit of noise. Fred invited people from all walks of life, artists, musicians, scientists, and even animals to sit down and talk, teach, or simply be present. People like Yo-Yo Ma, who showed kids how music could speak feelings words couldn't. Even Julia Child, who brought her charm and love of cooking into Fred's kitchen. LeVar Burton, a fellow literacy advocate from Reading Rainbow, was another guest too. David Copperfield, who added a little magic to the neighborhood. Tony Bennett, offering his smooth vocals and genuine warmth. And even Coco the gorilla, who used sign language to speak with Fred. An unforgettable moment of connection that left viewers in awe. Every guest, whether famous or not, was treated with the same dignity and respect Fred extended to his audience. That was the magic. Everyone mattered. The television industry took note. Over the years, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood earned plenty of recognition, including 4 Daytime Emmy Awards, honoring its excellence in children's programming. 55 Emmy nominations, showing just how consistent and impactful the show remained. The Cine Golden Eagle Award for Outstanding Educational Content, like Let's Talk About Going to the Doctor. And in 1997, Fred was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Daytime Emmys. During his acceptance speech, he famously asked the crowd to take 10 seconds of silence to think about the people who helped them become who they are. The entire room went still. It wasn't about the trophies, though. For Fred, the true reward was knowing children felt loved and understood. Even after the show ended in 2001, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood lived on in the heart of viewers. Thanks to streaming platforms and YouTube, new generations of kids continue to discover his calm voice, his gentle wisdom, and his cardigan-clad presence. And shows like Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, produced by Fred Rogers Productions, carry on his mission with new stories and new characters built from the same foundation of emotional honesty and kindness. Fred once said, "The greatest gift you ever give is your honest self." That's exactly what he gave for over 3 decades. And in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, that truth never goes out of style. To really understand Fred Rogers, you have to meet the woman who stood beside him through it all. Their story is quite surprising. Who was Joanne Rogers? Before the name Mrs. Fred Rogers ever made it into headlines, Joanne Bird was writing her own story. And it was anything but ordinary. Born in 1928 in Jacksonville, Florida, Joanne grew up in a home that valued curiosity, music, and meaningful conversation. Her parents weren't flashy or wealthy, but they were thoughtful and determined. Her father was a traveling salesman, and her mother a stay-at-home mom, who often kept the house running with love and structure. From an early age, Joanne learned how to speak up when it mattered, and how to listen even more. Music quickly became more than a hobby for Joanne. It was her language. By the time she was in grade school, she was already making waves as a piano prodigy. She didn't play to impress. She played because it made her feel alive. Classical music, jazz, cornmoose, folk tunes, she explored them all. And when she landed a spot at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, it was clear she wasn't just following a passion, she was carving a path. At Rollins, Joanne majored in music performance and quickly stood out not only for her technical skill, but for the soul she brought to every piece. Her professors saw it. Her classmates felt it. Whether she was performing solo or accompanying others, she had an ability to connect and draw people in with notes that seemed to say more than words ever could. But Joanne wasn't the kind of person who needed a spotlight. She was never chasing fame. What she valued more were people, deep friendships, honest conversations, a sense of community. She could light up a room with her laughter, but she also knew when to lean in and ask the kind of questions that made you pause. After college, she continued her studies at Florida State University and eventually made her way to Pittsburgh to study at Carnegie Tech, now Carnegie Mellon, where she further sharpened her skills and pushed herself creatively. This chapter of her life was all about growth as a musician, but also as a woman discovering who she wanted to be in the world. She also gave back as a teacher. In the 1950s, she taught at Chatham College's Preparatory School of Music, sharing her knowledge and passion with young students. Later, in the early 1970s, she spent 4 years teaching at Carlow College. Beyond teaching, Joanne was an accomplished concert pianist. She performed as part of a piano duo with her longtime friend Jeanine Morrison, with whom she recorded 2 albums, Duo Piano Favorites and a Virtuoso Duo Piano Showcase. Even then, Joanne wasn't fitting into a mold. She wasn't aiming to become someone's wife or someone's sidekick. She had a vision for her life that involved music, independence, and the freedom to express herself in full color. Whether it was in front of a piano or over coffee with a friend, she brought heart, wit, and an unshakable sense of calm. Joanne's contributions to the arts were recognized later in life. In 2019, she received an honorary degree from Duquesne University, acknowledging her lifelong dedication to music and education. So when her path eventually crossed with someone who shared that same depth of character and creativity, it wasn't a coincidence. It was 2 lives meeting at the right time. The love story behind the legend. It's easy to look at a decades-long marriage and only see the surface. Photos in matching outfits, a shared home, a public smile. But with Fred and Joanne Rogers, the story beneath the surface that made their love remarkable. Their love didn't shout. It started in the hushed corners of a college music hall in Florida. Fred and Joanne first crossed paths at Rollins College in the late 1940s. Both were music majors, both deeply dedicated to their craft, and both, unknowingly, about to become the most important person in each other's lives. Joanne wasn't the type to be dazzled easily. She had grown up with music in her veins and a sharp mind that cut through pretense. What caught her attention wasn't Fred's charm or his future potential. It was the way he listened, really listened, and the way he treated people with a softness that felt rare, even then. Their connection grew in practice rooms, piano labs, and overshared recitals. They weren't a couple built on candlelight and grand gestures. They built something far sturdier, a partnership rooted in shared rhythm, intellectual connection, and emotional safety. They spoke the same musical language, yes, but more importantly, they heard each other in a way few others could. After college, life didn't exactly roll out a red carpet for their relationship. Fred left for New York to start a job with NBC, while Joanne stayed behind in Florida. You'd think long-distance relationships are tough today, but back then there were no texts, no FaceTime calls, just pen, paper, and a lot of patience. And yet, the letters never stopped. Each envelope carried not only words, but layers of unspoken care, longing, and deepening trust. Then came the letter. Fred's proposal. Tucked between updates and affection was the question that would shape both their lives. Joanne was so overwhelmed, she dashed to a nearby phone booth to say yes so fast, in fact, that she nearly lost the letter on the way. She kept it safe after that, and with good reason. That piece of paper was the start of something unshakable. They got married in 1952 and began what would turn into over 50 years of marriage. But theirs wasn't the kind of union that sat pretty on a mantelpiece. It was alive, messy, funny, real. Music remained a central part of their bond. The two would often play piano duets together, delighting in the harmony as much as the occasional mistakes. They had their own inside jokes, their own shorthand. When Fred's work became demanding or the outside world felt loud, Joanne was his quiet place. They had 2 sons, James and John. Life at home was structured, but warm. Joanne wasn't just the mother of Fred Rogers' children. She was the emotional backbone of the family. She protected his space, made room for his process, and also challenged him when needed. She understood his silence, his routine, his deeper layers that few ever saw. And perhaps most importantly, she didn't try to change him. People often assume Fred Rogers was simple, kind, yes, but also uncomplicated. But those who really knew him, Joanne especially, understood that he was layered. He carried the weight of others' pain. He worried deeply about doing enough, being enough. Joanne was the one person who truly understood that. She held his complexities without fear and gave him permission to be both tender and flawed. Even as Fred became a beloved public figure, their marriage remained grounded. They didn't live for applause or attention. They lived for mornings filled with music, laughter that bubbled out during mundane moments, and the kind of companionship that's built on being fully known and still loved. What they shared wasn't a fairy tale, and that's exactly what made it beautiful. Behind the legend was a love story built on effort, respect, and an unshakable bond. And while the world saw Mr. Rogers as the gentle icon in a cardigan, Joanne knew the man behind the camera. She saw his worries, his fears, his discipline. She knew what the world didn't, and she kept those parts sacred. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real magic in their story. Not that it was perfect, but that it was real, and they chose it over and over for more than 5 decades. While the cameras rolled, he was the neighbor we all adored. But once the lights dimmed, a different Fred would quietly emerge. The public persona versus the private man. When you hear the name Fred Rogers, what's the first picture that pops into your head? Probably a calm man in a soft cardigan, tying his shoes and talking directly to you like you mattered more than anything else in the world. His voice was slow and steady, like a lullaby. His words felt safe. For so many people, Fred wasn't simply a TV host. He was the voice of comfort in childhood, a gentle guide through tough feelings. And for years, people have believed that what you saw on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was the real Fred. No act, no filter. And for the most part, that was true. Fred Rogers lived what he taught. He believed in kindness and practiced it daily, even when no cameras were rolling. His friends and co-workers backed this up time and time again. But what makes his story more powerful isn't how perfect he was, it's how he wasn't. Joanne Rogers, Fred's wife of more than 50 years, once said that while her husband really was as kind as people say, he was no saint. Not in the sugar-coated, untouchable way people sometimes imagine. She knew the real man, the one who got tired, who sometimes struggled, who dealt with stress and doubt like the rest of us. According to her, the kind-heartedness was genuine, but it took effort. Fred chose to be kind. He worked at it. There's something incredibly honest about that. On the outside, Fred seemed effortlessly calm, but inside, there was an unassuming discipline shaping every move. He kept routines, like swimming every morning and weighing himself daily to make sure he stayed at 143 pounds. That number meant something to him. 1 letter for I, 4 for love, 3 for you, a small ritual with a big message. But living up to that image, the idea of always being gentle, always being thoughtful, came with pressure. After all, millions of kids looked up to him. He didn't want to let them down. That responsibility weighed on him more than most people knew. And while he never complained about it publicly, Joanne saw the toll it took on him. She witnessed the tired days and subtle moments of self-doubt. She also saw the moments where their marriage faced its own tests. Like any long relationship, theirs had ups and downs. Joanne has mentioned that she was usually the one doing the disciplining when it came to their 2 sons. Fred was always the gentle one and had a harder time with that role. It wasn't always easy, and it didn't always feel balanced. His work was personal to him. He poured everything into it. That kind of emotional investment can be draining sometimes, not only for the person doing the work, but for the family around them. Fred's mission was beautiful, but it also came with immense responsibility. And sometimes that meant Joanne had to be the anchor while he carried the emotional weight of a generation. What's fascinating is how human all of this is. We often love to lift people up, call them heroes, and expect them to never stumble. But Fred didn't live in that fantasy. He lived in reality. One where he needed breaks, made mistakes, and leaned on others when things got heavy. Joanne helped us see that side of him, not to tear him down, but to make his goodness even more meaningful. Fred felt deeply. He cared about people, and sometimes that made him sensitive. That's what made Fred special. He chose patience. He chose softness. He chose to believe in the good, even when he had every reason to get frustrated. And that choice, that daily decision to live by love, that's what turned a reserved man in a sweater into a lasting legacy. But behind that calm and kindness, there's an awful truth Joanne Rogers didn't shy away from sharing. Something that adds a new layer to how we really understood Fred. The awful truth. When you hear the phrase, awful truth, your mind might jump to something shocking or scandalous. But what Joanne Rogers reveals about Fred isn't a wild secret. It's something much more delicate and real, a kind of truth that's often harder to share because it's wrapped in pain, vulnerability, and calm strength. Fred Rogers was a man known for his calm presence, warmth, and kindness. But as his wife, Joanne was witness to parts of his life that few ever saw. His final days were marked by a battle with stomach cancer that wasn't just a physical fight, but an emotional and spiritual journey for both of them. It's in these moments, away from the camera and public eye, that the awful truth begins to unfold, not about failure or disgrace, but about the human struggles behind the beloved figure. Joanne has spoken candidly about how Fred faced his illness with a courage, but it also brought to light moments of loneliness and doubt that were never part of his public persona. Even someone as gentle and patient as Fred had his private battles. Fred's illness came as a surprise. At first, he just felt some discomfort and indigestion, things easy to ignore or explain away. Joanne remembers how he quietly tried to manage the pain himself, careful with what he ate and patient with the growing unease. But when the pain became too much to bear, they finally sought answers. The news was hard. The cancer had spread, and the outlook wasn't good. Those long days of treatment, the physical toll and the creeping awareness that time was running out, created a space where Fred's usual certainty gave way to vulnerability. This man kept pushing forward, determined to stay involved with the things and people he loved. In January 2003, just weeks before he passed, he even showed up as the Grand Marshal of the Rose Parade in Pasadena, showing how much he cared about his commitments and the world around him. After surgery to remove part of his stomach, Fred spent some time in the hospital before coming home. Joanne tells of how playing the piano brought him small moments of peace and comfort, even when his body was weak. He passed away quietly at home on February 27, 2003, surrounded by family, just a day after his grandson's birthday. For years, Joanne stayed silent about many of these details. Partly, it was out of respect for Fred's privacy and the image he had cultivated for decades. But as time passed, Joanne realized that hiding this side of Fred wasn't fair to his story or to the people who loved him. By sharing the truth she believed, she could honor him in a deeper, more honest way. One of the most touching parts of Joanne's reflections is how the cancer affected their relationship. Fred had long been the steady, loving anchor in their family, but illness shifted the dynamics. Joanne took on the role of caregiver, which brought its own challenges and emotional weight. She describes feeling both immense love and the strain of watching someone so full of life confront such a difficult battle. There were moments when the man she admired so deeply was also someone who needed her care, patience, and sometimes just her presence to hold the space for his pain. In recent interviews and documentaries like the acclaimed Won't You Be My Neighbor, Joanne opened a door to some lesser-known stories about Fred's last years. For example, she shared how he maintained his sense of humor even in the toughest moments. Fred's ability to find light in darkness didn't disappear with illness. It simply transformed, showing a different but no less inspiring side of him. During the days leading to his death, Joanne recalled in one interview, "I said to him, 'You know, we're going to be okay. We're going to be all right. The boys will be fine, and I'm going to try to be fine.' So when he went, I could feel he went at peace and even with joy." Joanne's decision to share these experiences comes from a place of love and protection. She understands the weight of Fred's legacy and the way people have looked up to him as a beacon of kindness and hope. Exactly 2 years after he passed, she said, "Wouldn't it be nice if we could just tell ourselves, okay, you've grieved. Your time to grieve is up. Now it's time to get your act together. But it's not like that for me. Some days I feel energized. Some days I feel depleted. Grieving can be exhausting." Joanne's reflections invite us to see Fred Rogers not as a distant icon, but as a man who, like all of us, wrestled with pain and uncertainty. Yet through it all, he chose to live with kindness and authenticity until the very end. And that makes this truth not awful in a tragic sense, but powerful. Even after Fred was passed away, Joanne didn't close the book. Instead, she turned the page, and what came next caught everyone off guard. Joanne Rogers' role in preserving and promoting Fred's legacy. When Fred Rogers passed away in 2003, many expected Joanne Rogers to step back and mourn quietly. But she chose a different path. Instead of fading into the background, she became the steady force keeping Fred's message alive. For more than 50 years, they shared a life full of kindness and purpose, and Joanne made sure that spirit didn't disappear with him. Joanne didn't only hold a title, she took real charge as the chair emerita of Fred Rogers Productions, the very company Fred started to create his beloved shows. As the world around the media shifted fast, she made sure the heart of Fred's work stayed strong. The shows continued to teach kids about feelings, friendship, and understanding without losing their gentle, thoughtful touch. Joanne's leadership kept Fred's vision from becoming just a memory. Instead, it kept growing and reaching new families. Joanne stepped into the spotlight too. She shared stories about Fred's life and ideas on TV and at events, always reminding people why kindness matters. Her voice carried Fred's lessons to places far beyond the original neighborhood, showing how important it is for children to understand their emotions and the world around them. Joanne didn't merely protect Fred's legacy behind the scenes, she was out there, making sure his message stayed alive and meaningful. If you saw the 2019 movie, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, you might have noticed Joanne herself playing a small but memorable role. That cameo wasn't a bit of casting, it was her way of stepping in and sharing a piece of their life together. It gave viewers a glimpse of the woman who knew Fred best, adding a real personal touch to the story on screen. Beyond the movie, Joanne appeared in documentaries and interviews, giving people a chance to hear directly from the person who lived alongside Fred every day. Joanne's job wasn't only to shine a bright light on Fred's kindness. Her love for music has been a key part of her story, too. A talented concert pianist, she brought her own creativity and warmth to the table. Her music connected with people just like Fred's words did, reminding everyone that art and kindness go hand in hand. People who know Joanne also speak of her humor and grounded wisdom, traits that complemented Fred's warmth and made her the perfect partner in keeping his spirit alive. When Fred Rogers passed away in 2003, the messages he left behind continued to whisper through the world he loved, and none more powerfully than the simple, mysterious code he held closest to his heart. If you ever asked Fred Rogers what love looked like, he might have answered with 3 little numbers, 1 for 3. Remember we talked about that earlier? It wasn't random, it wasn't trendy. To Fred, 1 for 3 meant I love you. 1 letter in I, 4 in love, 3 in you. Simple, elegant, and powerful. It's the kind of message you don't shout, you live it. And that's exactly what he did. Fred didn't just talk about love, he wove it into the fabric of his daily life. He even kept his weight at exactly 143 pounds for most of his adult life. It's rare to see someone take a symbolic number and build their life around it. Fred was very intentional in every step, every word, every silent pause between sentences, and that number didn't stop with him. In 2019, the state of Pennsylvania, his home state, decided to honor his legacy in a way that felt perfectly Fred. They officially made May 23rd, 143 Day, because it's the 143rd day of the year. The idea was to do something kind, say something thoughtful, be a good neighbor. Joanne later passed away on January 14, 2021, at the age of 92, in their Pittsburgh home. She was surrounded by loved ones, just as Fred would have wanted. She survived by their 2 sons, and a legacy just as heartfelt and enduring as Fred's. Together, Fred and Joanne weren't flashy. They didn't need to be. They believed that love was calm, consistent, and transformative. And sometimes saying, I love you, only takes 3 numbers. So now that Joanne Rogers has broken her silence, could it be that behind Fred Rogers' gentle smile, there was an awful truth he quietly carried to his grave, and the world chose to ignore it? Tell us what you think in the comments section. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. For more videos like this, tap on the next video on your screen.